Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 117, A Most Logical Story. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're diving into the story told in the original series Star Trek episode, The Tholian Web. And this is an episode that we selected as one of our top 5 favorite episodes from the original series. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But in the meantime, how are you doing today, Mike?
I am just grand. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
Nothing is new in my writing world. As you know, I've moved to a new area earlier this year, and now that the weather's good, I've been exploring. I've been out hiking, going to the rivers, going to the coast, walking along the beach, just seeing what's out there, seeing what this place has to offer. But I've just been enjoying my outdoor time mostly. So no writing, unfortunately. Eventually, I'll get back to that.
That sounds really wonderful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful location here. But how about you? Are you actually working on writing?
I am.
Excellent.
I have the roadmap to the end of Meridian, which is book 3 in the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard. It's still kind of messy, but I feel like I know where I'm going, and I've actually started just throwing things in chapters. This chapter is going to be this, and this chapter is going to be that, and this chapter is going to be this, so that I can just sort of push forward. I would say I'm 3/5 of the way through. So I'm just sort of, just producing stuff. And then I have to go back and make sure that these really cool ideas that I created are actually make sense for the rest of the story, right? Because the problem with being a discovery writer is I discover something cool midway through the story, and then I'm like, oh, I need to go back and make sure I build it in so that it doesn't just like all of a sudden pop out and, oh, look, something new that, it's got to make sense. So
yeah, that's great though.
I'm excited. I'm getting there.
Yeah,
which is nice, and I'm really excited that I see this book being finished. Gosh, maybe by the end of the month. That would be awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. And then I can work on book 4, which is called Umbra, and that's where everything just goes terribly wrong.
Uh-oh.
Yep. Because Umbra means shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the shadowy part of the book where everything goes terribly wrong. Everybody has to dig deep, pull themselves out of the terrible fate that I put them in. So, what interesting stories have you found in books, movies, or TV lately?
Let's see. I watched a movie. I think it's maybe an Amazon movie called Deep Cover.
Oh, okay.
It's a comedy crime movie, I guess. It's about these people who are working on improv, like improv comedy.
Yeah.
And this cop recruits them to like go undercover, kind of like use their acting and improvisational skills. And then it just keeps getting, more serious, and the situation keeps getting worse and stuff like that. It's a pretty cool movie. I enjoyed it.
I'm still watching The Librarians. It's a fun little show. It's not that serious. And
right.
We're watching shows now 10 years later after this show had been made, 10 years later after this show was made, that are made for streaming shows. And if they don't perform to whatever requirement that the streaming channels require, they get canceled all the time. And so
Yeah.
this one is so cute. I keep wondering why it wasn't canceled. And it makes me kind of grateful for the days when they would just keep producing a show and having fun with it and having it be just a beach read kind of show without it having to hit particular, viewing whatever in a particular period of time or else they're going to get canceled. And I know that used to happen back in the old days. I mean, it happened to Star Trek. We're talking about Star Trek today, right? And Star Trek was canceled. And then there was this huge
Yeah.
fan outpouring and letter writing campaign that brought it back. And it still got canceled after 3 seasons. But it just sort of feels like things get canceled even sooner now before they get a chance to really get going. I don't know, maybe, and that is a fully, qualitative observation. I have no data to support that, but it's just the way it feels.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that, I think. And some of the things I think are like Wheel of Time, where it does have an audience, it does have a fan base, but I think it's so expensive to make.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have enough of an audience to justify the cost, unfortunately. So I think that's what it is a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's just, this thing is so expensive for us. We can't justify continuing it, even though, the people who are watching it really like it. I do wish that one of these platforms or channels, whatever you want to call them, if they have a series that's ongoing, that's telling like a continuous story, if they decide to cancel it, I feel like give them another episode or 2 to wrap the story up. Like, I think that would go so far for the fans, for people to really appreciate that. Like, let's say Apple does that or Amazon does that. Like, you would really respect that company a lot more, and you'd be willing to spend time diving into their shows because it's like, okay, at least they're going to end it. Even if it gets canceled, at least they're going to end it. I think they build a lot of goodwill doing that. Every once in a while they will, but not as like a routine practice.
I think the other thing that kind of bothers me about that is that in this age where these shows are essentially evergreen, they're not going anywhere unless they get pulled from a streaming channel. They're going to be available for somebody to watch, which means that, like Star Trek in syndication back in the 70s, they may find their fan base and become incredibly popular. And so to end the series before it has a chance to really get going, or not give a wrap-up a couple of episodes like you're suggesting, is not really focusing on the patterns of how a show can take off well after it's been finished and then become very popular. And so there's a short-sightedness there that's very strange.
Yeah. I wonder, now that you mention that, if we might see that occasionally, like a show that's 2 or 3 years old that suddenly finds an audience and they're like, oh, well, we'll bring that back, and they get the band back together kind of.
Yeah. Well, and I think they do that. I mean, I think they do that all the time.
Yeah, maybe they do.
Like this Librarians show. You told me they're making a new one, which means that streaming may have created a new fan base for it. Oh, no. Interesting. Would you like to talk Tholian Web?
Oh, yes. Let's do it.
Today we're talking about the Star Trek original series episode, The Tholian Web. And we decided on this episode after saying, hey, we'd really like to talk about a Star Trek episode, and we kind of compiled a list of our favorite episodes, which of course included the classics City on the Edge of Forever, and Amok Time, and Mirror Mirror, but it also included this one, The Tholian Web. And so we decided to talk about this one because, not that there's anything wrong with those other episodes, they are great episodes, they are well represented in lists and discussions of classic Star Trek episodes that are truly superior. But we decided to talk about this one because this one doesn't get talked about that much. And I will argue that it is one of the top 5 best episodes of Star Trek. And anyone has other opinions on that, please feel free to comment in the comment section, because I know everybody has different opinions and different likes and dislikes when it comes to Star Trek, but this has always been one of my favorites. So let me go ahead and read the synopsis that you can find on IMDb. With Captain Kirk and the derelict USS Defiant apparently lost, the Enterprise grapples with an insanity-causing plague and an attack by the Tholians. So what do you like about this episode, Mike?
First of all, I'm surprised we haven't discussed the original Star Trek series at all yet.
I know.
Well, we talked about Wrath of Khan, which is sort of an extension. but not this, which is surprising because this is probably the thing that got me into science fiction originally. I was
Yeah.
watching this in syndication when I was young. Like a lot
Yeah.
of people in my generation and your generation really latched onto this show. So it's fun to finally discuss it. And like you
I agree.
said, this is one episode among many that are really good. And for me, one of the reasons that I wanted to discuss this episode was the character stuff, which we'll get to. But I think overall, it's very well plotted. There's some good character stuff. There's some interesting sci-fi stuff. Yeah, it's a very engaging episode. And I think starting from the beginning, like is often the case with Star Trek, it has a good setup of a mystery in the opening sequence. They go over
Yeah.
to this ship, right? And people killed each other. What? And the ship's kind of like half translucent and they can't get really good lock on it. You're like wondering what's going on. I think that's great. It immediately gets you into the story and invested in what's going to happen. As an aside, I liked the 1960s glittery spacesuits that they had. That was funny. There's a lot of 1960s stuff in the original Star Trek. The hairstyles, the colors, all this stuff is funny. But yeah, it's a great setup for the show. And I think this episode does a fantastic job of introducing a series of problems. Right? There's a ship disappears and oh no, the captain's on the ship and he's lost. And also this area of space is fragile and tearing itself apart, so we can't really move. And then there's the problem with what's happening with the crew, this ailment that's affecting them, causing them to go crazy and trying to kill each other. The aliens arrive and they're ready to start a battle. And then there's an attack and the ship gets damaged. And then they start getting webbed in by the Tholians. So it's like one thing after another starts happening. And it doesn't seem forced. It flows logically. And it's just super engaging. So I thought they did that fantastically well. I loved that we get to see Spock as captain. He's very competent and very calm, and you're rooting for him in this awful situation that he's been put into. I mean, this situation is worse in a lot of ways than what Kirk had to face in many other episodes. So I love that. And then I like how there's this conflict between Spock and McCoy, of course, and how we see Kirk nail that conflict in his prediction of what's going to happen given his demise. I thought that was really well handled. I thought Spock was great in this episode. I loved how he's just so dispassionately Vulcan throughout this episode. He's just calm and matter of fact while everyone's freaking out around him. I thought that was great. And then it does something well also that we've mentioned many times before, which is the ticking clock. And they have an interesting one in this episode in the form of the web. The Tholians are wrapping them up in this web, and when they finish, they're basically trapped in there and they're going to be stuck forever, as Spock says. So yeah, it's a very engaging, compelling, dramatic episode, and I liked that amid the plot dramatics, there are good character conflict and relationship developments as well. Yeah, this is just a super engaging episode for me. I really enjoyed it.
I agree. I really enjoyed this well, and I really enjoyed looking at it through the eyes of story and watching it again that way. I agree. The layers of mystery in this are fantastic. And when they solve one mystery, they give you a new one.
Yeah.
And just move you right through. And, not only did they have the ticking clock of the Tholians, but they had the ticking clock of this interphase thing too.
Yes.
So, they had to get out of there before they went insane, and they had to get the captain while there was a gap in this interphase, and oh no, the Tholians. And so there's just so many layers, and you're exactly right. We made perfect, almost all. I do have one sort of couple of sense issue things, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But for the most part, it really made sense moving the plot forward. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And as far as the character piece is concerned, you're exactly correct. The characters were very true to themselves throughout the story, and throughout the characters were what they had been laid out to be in the first two seasons. This is a third season episode, and so the first two seasons really established who they were, and what they did in this episode was consistent and exactly on track for what they would have done previously. And so I really like that.
I actually have said that on something that I think could be improved. So this will be an interesting talk when we get to there. But continue with what you're saying.
And I think from that point, I don't think there was any real character arc for these guys. It was sort of the same sort of differences of opinion, different leadership style issues that we would frequently see here. So I'll be interested in seeing what you think.
Yeah, I think it's more of a relationship development than an individual character development.
Yes, I agree with that. Like I said, it was all these layers of mystery all woven together, from what's going on with space to what's going on with the Defiant to what happened to the Defiant's crew. How did they all die? To what's happening with Chekhov, to what's happening with Uhura, to what's happening with the captain. I mean, it was just one thing after the other. And like I said, after they solved one problem, then there was a new mystery that they had to solve. And I really enjoyed it. I, like you, started watching this in syndication. I was very young. And I liked the actual science fiction-y nature of this story. You know, you have something weird happening with space. You have this extraterrestrial with their own technology that they use to defend their space, and the technology is interesting and different and requires cleverness and thoughtfulness to solve. The what's going on with the captain was very science fiction-y, though there was also a little element of a little spookiness to it too. I remember that being it was a little spooky as a kid. Here's the ghost of the captain, right? Yeah. But it still works. It ties it all in together. So that was also one of the things I always loved about this show, is this real science fiction-y elements to this that I always thought were a lot of fun.
There's something else they did in here I just thought of in this episode that was kind of interesting with the Tholians, right? For us as viewers, we don't know what these aliens are.
Yeah.
But clearly Spock knew about them. He says something like, oh, punctual as usual, or something like that.
Right, Tholian punctuality, yeah.
Yeah, a throwaway line that hints at backstory without it being something that the writers feel they needed to divulge. It's like, yeah, they know about these aliens already, and that's enough. We don't need to tell you anymore. I thought that was great. That's very clever. Because sometimes as writers, we feel like we have to explain everything, right? And you don't. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So let's talk about anything we might have changed as a writer. Is there anything that you found in this episode that you might have changed?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing that came to mind was right at the beginning when Spock says, I'm looking at the sensors and it's like that thing's not even there. And then a minute later, they've got a transporter lock and they beam right onto the ship. So how are you transporting there if you don't have any sensors to even detect the ship? And there was no reason for Spock to have said that line. They could have just left that line out, and you wouldn't have had that back-to-back kind of contradiction. So I wouldn't have mentioned that. It didn't add anything to the episode that they couldn't detect the ship. Obviously, they could see it. There was light being emitted from it, so the sensors should have picked up something, and then they beamed on it anyway. So that's a small thing. It's just something I picked up on this watch through. The bigger thing for me is Bones was kind of a jerk in this episode, I thought. Spock. I understand they wanted to have the conflict between him and Spock, which makes sense. And I think this was a great episode to do that in, with Kirk being gone and them having to review his final orders. I thought the setup of that was really good. He just seemed irrationally angry. And I actually didn't think he was playing to his character. Like, he's kind of that way, but I didn't feel like his motivation was playing to his character. He was basically arguing for, let's leave Jim and get out of this space. And it seems like he would have been the one complaining that Spock was trying to do just that and saying they should stay there and save Captain Kirk as long as there's any chance. So it seemed like he was playing the opposite role for me, given his relationship with Kirk. I probably, if I was going to change it, I either would have had Spock acknowledge that, okay, we tried to save Kirk, he's died, we got to craft a plan to escape, and then have Bones get mad at him then that Spock was just going to leave and abandon Kirk. That would have made more sense for Bones and would have set up the conflict perfectly, and it could have played out exactly the same way. Or if they wanted to play them against what our expectations were, which is okay, then I would have had Bones initially be a little more understanding about Spock's concern, because obviously he would have felt the same way about leaving the captain. And then maybe he comes to the realization like that they have to leave. And he could specifically mention that, like, I can't believe I'm being the logical one here. We have to save the crew. As it was, it didn't feel natural to his character, his
Interesting.
motivation
Okay.
for
Yeah.
me. So I would have changed it either one way or the other. What about you?
Okay.
Did you agree with any of those? And what else did you find?
I agree with you about the very first scene where I think Spock says some things about like space is doing something weird and we can't find him on find the ship on sensors, just like you pointed out. And I think those were designed to hook the viewer before the first commercial break. But now without a commercial break, it doesn't make sense. I totally agree. Because A, you're right, they were able to beam aboard, so they knew something was there, something got locked onto. And B, within a few scenes, he's essentially explaining this is an interface point in space.
Right.
And he either knew that at the beginning and didn't say it, or figured it out later and didn't say that he figured it out.
Yeah.
He just all of a sudden started talking about, well, this is where we are. So there was a lack of continuity there that could have been corrected by either not mentioning it, like you suggested, or explaining how you figured it out.
That's a good point, because there's a lot that happens in this episode. I wonder if the script was longer and they had to trim something out. It almost feels that way.
The other thing I would have liked to have seen would have been, once the captain was lost, I would have liked for there to have been a brief meeting of all the officers to talk about what's going to happen next. And maybe there wasn't time for that. I don't know. But I think if you did that, that would have given you the opportunity to resolve the concern that you had about the personality and the focus of each of these characters, for them to voice their concerns right then and there at the meeting. You know, just a couple of minutes scene, maybe a single minute scene where everybody kind of voices their concerns. Spock says, no, this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm ordering you to do. And everybody leaves. But then you have the groundwork laid for McCoy's behavior. And it also would make sense because as a leader taking over for his captain, who's been lost suddenly, you'd want to he would logically understand the need to pull people together and say, okay, this is what's going to happen now. This is what the captain would have wanted. And then he could have said to McCoy, okay, now we need to go listen to the last orders. And it would have, I think, flowed really well to that.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I agree. I think that would have been better.
And then one other thing that kind of stood out to me this time on this watch, when they told Captain Kirk that they didn't listen to the recording, that was a lie.
Yes.
Spock was lying.
I know, I saw that too.
Vulcans don't lie.
Right.
He exaggerates. So I don't know, was he? It was just sort of funny.
Yeah.
I don't actually think it takes away from the episode at all. It's just sort of like, well, that's not really character continuity. So there must be a really logical reason for it.
Yes.
That's what I would. So let's talk about themes. Did you pull any themes from the Tholian Web?
Yeah, I did. One of the themes I got was remaining calm under pressure can save you from even seemingly inevitable disaster. Another was working together can see you through dark times. And I think part of that, I think, is also what Kirk says in his message, which is use each other's strengths, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes with the working together thing. So that's what I got. What about you?
I got almost the exact same thing. I have working together in a crisis while staying true to oneself. And Spock really actually epitomizes that mostly here. He really stayed true to his Vulcan logic and his training. Those things told him to do in order to safeguard the situation, safeguard the ship, safeguard the crew, and try to save their captain. And he really, like you pointed out, that he really remained true to himself.
Yeah, Spock was key in this episode, and he really stepped up to the plate.
I agree. So as a writer, what do you take away from the Tholian Web?
For me, the thing that stood out is the increasing complications, right? We start off with this, and then we add this, and we have this, and then the aliens are coming in, and now they're webbing us, and the space is ripping apart, and right, the crew's going mad. All these things just building on each other. I thought that was great. So that's my takeaways. Using that to create engagement and to increase tension.
And I have exactly the same thing. Many layers well woven together. You know, all these story layers that are just all woven together. Resolve one problem, create a new one. It's really beautifully done, especially in such a short format when you think about how much time they've spent storytelling here. It's not that much time.
Yeah, very tight script.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for joining us as we talked about the original series Star Trek episode, The Tholian Web. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. Your support noticed through every like and every share means the world to us.
If you enjoyed today's themes, here are some further readings. E.W. Barnes' Temporal Protection Corps series delves into time travel with heart, where duty to history meets personal stake.
And all links are in the show notes if you're curious to explore. The Stories Told podcast is available on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, drop a note on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes too. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the novel Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, always great to talk Star Trek.
Always great to talk Star Trek. And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.